I'm of course joined with my good friend Keegan Hashe, and yeah. So what should we start with first, Keegan?
Well, I think I watched your video on the parts, uh, different performance parts, and it was a very good video, by the way. I think we should touch base on maybe gearing, because I think everybody talks about engine mods, but they don't really talk about the big limiting factor to how fast you can go.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great one. So of course, with like all the kits and stuff that you can build them, modify them, and even stock. A lot of the kits have different characteristics, more torque, less torque, more high end, whatever, what have you. And so, of course, even with the bikes, the Raider, the Rider, all that stuff, the gearing will be different. How how would you explain like an ideal gearing, Keegan?
Yeah. So like basically, if I was to explain it to like a beginner, I probably word it like this. The stock 44 tooth that comes with your kit is like pretty limiting because once you start to modify your engine and you increase its RPM limit, you're going to find that even when increasing RPM limit through porting, through adding a pipe, whatever, that you're still only hitting 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, if that. So what you basically better off doing is I honestly there's no real set guideline to like what engine can use what sprocket simply due to the fact that there's many like factors like your actual wheel size, the rider's weight, and the area that you're riding in. Like you could be going up hills, you go in flat area. So I think for most people with like stockish kind of engine setups, I think a 40 tooth is like a really good option because you get the best of
Yeah.
both worlds, in my opinion. Because I've had really good experiences with a 40 tooth. You still get all the hill climbing ability, but you still get some good top end as well. Like as fast as you want to go on a bicycle. Um, Obviously, there's more to it, but I think if you got anything that's pretty heavily modified, then a 36 tooth is going to do, like we're talking like Minarelli's or a Phantom 85, Avenger 85, and that kind of power realm, a 36 tooth is going to be pretty well paired. And then obviously you can go even smaller than that. But the way I like to think of it when it comes to beginners is a 44 tooth is like putting your car in first gear, and a 36 tooth is like putting in third gear, right? If you have that same engine on both of those sprockets, the 36 tooth is going to take off slower, but it's going to have a higher top speed. And if you have a 44 tooth, it'll take off like a bat out of hell, but it won't have a high top speed.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way that I can explain it. But gearing is like pretty important because you could have like an engine that has a lot of power. Like this is a good example. My road bike, it had 29-inch wheels, and I had a 36 tooth on it, thinking that was optimal. But because of the bigger wheel size itself, it actually changes your gearing a lot.
Yeah.
So I had to end up running, yeah, a 44 tooth, which was pretty odd, right? Because it doesn't, it's like, damn, I'm hitting like 45, 50 miles an hour on a 44 tooth. But like I said, that wheel size makes a huge difference.
Yeah, like for example, I'm using a 44 tooth on just my standard 26-inch wheels with my Minarelli. And I mean, it tops out at, yeah, like 30, 35 miles per hour. And the reason that I have a 44 tooth on mine is, as Keegan just expressed, the smaller the sprocket in the back, the faster the top speed, but the you'll start sacrificing torque. Where I live, there's a ton of wicked hills. Like it'll be you'll have a beast of a bike to get up some of these hills, and so um, to allow my bike to get up some of those hills, I have to gear to compensate for it. And so, I mean, 35 miles per hour is still all that I need on a bicycle, but I need all that torque I can get.
And the other big thing too, right, is like people will talk about like, and you'll see in the background some Facebook posts and stuff. You'll see the 56 tooth is mentioned or the 52 tooth, and those, in my opinion, yeah, those in my opinion are strictly like trail riding sprockets. So if you're going to be hitting some mountain bike trails and you got a good front shock on it, or you have some nice dirt tires on it, and that's all you intend doing is like going on trails and never hitting the road, then yeah, that sprocket's going to be suited for you. But don't think putting a 56 tooth on is going to do any benefits for you out in the main road. Yes, you'll take off, but you're only going to do like 20 miles an hour, if that.
Yeah.
So I think we should move on because I'm pretty sure everybody's tired of hearing about gearing. I think we should talk about some carburetor stuff.
Absolutely. That's very important and not a
It's
lot talked
it's
about.
funny that I say that because I just got a new. Are you familiar with that? Like I can never think of the name of it. It's that black carburetor on Amazon. It's like a Minarelli carburetor, 19 millimeter. What the hell is it called?
It's like the PE8 or something.
Yeah, PGHB or whatever. I got one of those, and it has 3 jets. I'll have
Oh,
to
wow.
send you a picture. Yeah,
Yeah, you have to send me
it's
the
got a
link.
freaking idle jet. It's got a pilot, and then it's got a main
Huh.
and an air screw. A lot of stuff to tune.
You have to send me that because that name does not ring a bell.
It's like $30 here. I'll send you it. Well, I'll send you the picture first without the float bowl on it. It looks pretty funky.
Oh yeah, those
Yeah, they're really like I haven't tested it out yet, but I've
the
heard really
Delor
good things.
they're Delordo style, right?
Yeah, that's the name, Delordo carb. Yeah, I'm gonna try it out, see how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know because I've heard those are fantastic.
Because I've just been sticking PWKs on everything I get my hands on, and I thought I'd change it up a little bit. So
Heck yeah.
it's weird, dude, because the velocity stack it's plastic, but it unscrews, so you could put different size velocity stacks in it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
So
really freaking cool.
so we want to talk a little bit about carburetor sizing and what makes a good
Yeah, I
carburetor.
think we should do like 2 sections. We should talk about like sizing it for your engine properly, and then we
Yeah.
should talk about jetting itself. Because I think a lot of people get like misleaded on the not only the names of all the jets, but like where to move from. Like, let's say you put a new carb on and you start the bike up and it runs a certain way. How do I fix it so it runs properly? I think we should
Yeah.
like touch bases on those things for sure.
So you want to first start with sizing.
Sure, yeah.
Cool. And so this hasn't this isn't really covered a whole lot. Like, I mean, I guess it kind of is. I don't know. But there's a whole formula and everything that I don't remember. If for clarification, go and watch Build Break Fix's video on this. He did a full video covering sizing of carburetors and everything. Definitely recommend it. Go check it out. But pretty much the entire any China doll, do not put a smaller carburetor than like a 17 millimeter, and don't get anything bigger than like 21 millimeters. And what I mean by those measurements is the inside of the slide, that diameter, I guess the inner diameter of the slide, if it exceeds 21 millimeters or is smaller than 17 millimeters, it'll actually hinder performance for your engine. I guess there's limiting factors, I guess, with that statement. Of course, if you have a ton of port work and all that stuff, you can get a bigger carburetor, but um, that's just for the basis.
Yeah. So like it's just a rule of thumb, the way that I kind of size carburetors. I know I've gone too far when it comes to sizing. When I give it full throttle at like low RPM and it just bogs. What with the 21 millimeter on my YD100, we all know how that thing never ran right. I would give it full throttle and it would bog down. But if I do it on any of my other bikes, like the Minarelli or the Saws, it doesn't bog down at all. It stays right with it, and that's when you know if you got the correct size or you've
Yeah.
either gone too small, right? Because like when you full throttle it at like 10 miles an hour and it just takes it, then you know, hey, this carburetor is the right size. That's just a good rule of thumb to go by, also.
Yeah, but also tuning has to play a big role in that as well.
Oh yeah, but it's just like the way that I look at it, because I mean, there's different types too. You got your flat slides, you got your round slide carburetors, you got ones that just have a lot more tunability than some other ones. Like
Yeah.
the HP is a prime example. That has one main jet. If you can't tune one main jet, this is the wrong hobby for you. But anyways, um, yeah. So that's real. Like you got your NTs, you got your HP carburetors, you got your OKOs, your PWKs, like the bigger, flat slides.
Yeah.
Um, there's
And
so many different types.
really the only huge benefits that come with these carburetors um, is the tunability. Like,
Exactly. Like the actual airflow is, unless you get super large with the sizing, it's not much different. I mean, if you look at a standard NT versus like one of those nibby carbs, the smallest nibby carb is like 17 millimeters.
yeah,
NT speed is like 15. So you're only gaining about 2 mil in size. But like you said, it's the tunability of the carburetor. You have an air screw to mess with it for like low idle adjustments. You have your pilot jet for like quarter throttle. You got your needle for the mid range, and you got your main jet for full. And some of them
absolutely.
even have power jets, which are totally different.
Yeah. And so like the Bofang carburetors, the NT carburetors, the ones that come stock with your engines are not great for like higher performance because they're great for just tuning on the fly. They're super easy to tune for just a stock engine, but when you get to the higher RPMs, there's a lot more dead spots in your tune because you
Exactly.
can only really tune your needle jet and your main jet. There is no
So
pilot,
much.
there is no air fuel mixture. And so there's all those different gaps where it's just dead performance pretty much. And so if you get like a VM18 carburetor, for instance, it might not be that much bigger in terms of like that inner diameter of the slide, but you can tune individually all the different parts. So there are no dead spots, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Unpopular opinion. I think for our hobby, a VM18 is very overrated. I don't
I
know
mean,
why, but it's not that it's a bad carburetor. It's an awesome carburetor. But do the some math here. Well, not math. Do some like common sense math. You have $100 engine, and you have a carburetor that is a good portion of the cost of the engine.
like, I don't know how much it is where
Dude,
you live, but
where I
like,
live, it's like $100.
yeah, genuine ones are like 100, $120 in the US.
Yeah.
But you can
So
buy, I've seen like the knockoff ones for like $42 or whatever. I kind of want to get one of those because it's like half the price of the genuine ones. And like the PWKs and the VM20 carburetors, even the knockoff ones, I have not had any issues with. So I don't know. I kind
the
of want to.
honestly, the carburetors that I've had the most trouble with are the PZ series. I don't know why. I've had so many issues with the float sticking, so many issues with gas leaking. I've got them resolved, but like PZs are one of those things. Like I got one from a lawn tractor, PZ30, a super big carburetor. And you basically, if you buy one of those, you're almost guaranteed to have to mess with it somehow. You can't just stick one of those on. And at least in my experience, every time I put one on, it works like dog crap, and then you got to mess with it. But all the PWKs that I put on, like I have three of those have all performed flawlessly. I don't even on my one bike, I don't even have a gas valve. It just holds gas that well. And you know, the PZ, I don't know why. It's just because it's a $20 carburetor, the quality control isn't there, and the machining's probably not the best. Honestly, the best brand for like motorized bike stuff, in my opinion, is probably the Nibbies, because I just find the price
Yeah.
to performance ratio of those is so good that you just can't go wrong. Like you have, like I said, you have the 17 millimeter, the 19. It goes all the way up to like 28 or something. So it covers all the bases, and they come in, at least where I live, around like 40 to $50. So it's
Yeah.
very affordable.
And they're really good quality. They're pretty diverse in terms of like what they fit on like the intake like how they mount up to the intake.
Yeah.
They have multiple different designs, the sizes. They're a lot very adjustable. So Nibby for the win for sure. So if you're looking for a carburetor, Nibby's the way to go.
Yeah. So I think we should talk about the actual tune now.
Yeah.
So let's say like the average person just put I'm trying to think of a carburetor. PZ19. We'll just throw that out there with a G2 read, and it's not performing right. It's like it's worse than what they started off with. So
Does the
like
does the PZ19 that has the main jet, the
the
pilot jet,
pilot,
the does it
yeah,
have an emulsion tube adjustment or not?
that one. What do you mean
Let's
emulsion?
let's not get into the emulsion tubes
No,
because you
that's
can
probably
like
too far.
because the PWKs, at least the one on mine, you can like get bigger emulsion tubes and stuff, but
Oh, okay.
we'll save
That's
that for like advanced.
yeah. No, I've never changed the ones in mine just because I've never really had felt the need to. But I'm sure it's
Yeah.
like I said, those are so adjustable.
If it runs good, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, yeah, I'm just gonna be
Yeah.
honest with you. The way that I do jetting is I I kind of where I've had so much experiences with different motors. If I kind of go off the CCs, not necessarily what's done to it. So like, if or I should say like port work wise and stuff. So if you have like I'm trying to throw an example out there that makes sense, but you can kind of pretty much estimate what jets it needs. So like when I built my MS440, I put in just to start with, I think it was like a 95 main and a 35 pilot, and it obviously was way too rich, but it gets you. You can always be safe, right? So like run more fuel, so you would start out richer, and then you can work your way down. If you start out too lean and it's a brand new motor, that is very risky for obvious reasons. So
Yeah.
I think with jetting, the best thing that you can tell a person is just to throw like on the richer side and then just go for a ride, warm it up fully, hit all the throttle positions, and then work your way down until you think it's right. Because honestly, jetting is all by sound. Like when you go along and you crack it, if it doesn't hesitate and it feels like it's pulling good, then you pretty much got it. And the thing
Yeah.
too, I was gonna ask you is, do your bikes like, do you have a lot of smoke coming out the back, or is it fairly like lean burning? I was gonna ask you, like on your two strokes.
For my two strokes, when they're warming up, they have a little bit of that smoke, but I mean, when it warms up, it's not much smoke at all.
Okay,
But
that's
I
the
mean,
same with mine.
in terms of like running rich, I'm running pretty dang rich. So I don't know if I'm using the AMSOIL Dominator.
Yeah, that's probably why you have such a good oil that it just burns better.
Yeah, because like
Uh,
I mean, I've so another thing that I want to say with tuning your carburetor, how to tell if your overall mixture is too rich or too lean is the spark plug test. Now, as you mentioned with the oil, one flaw with the spark plug test is that if you're running the like a low quality oil and you go off of that spark plug, if you're using just like a crappy oil and you look at the spark plug and there's a ton of soot on it, you can't really get a good measure for it. And so, I mean, I've been down that road. I've tuned with spark plugs for a while. And before I was using the AMSOIL Dominator, like the full synthetic oils that burn really well, I would get a ton of soot on my spark plug. And then I would tune it to run leaner, even though it was running lean, but there's still a ton of soot on it. And I could never get a good reading, but now
yeah,
that I'm running like the full synthetic, it's so much easier to go off the spark plugs.
I mean honestly, I run semi-synthetic, and I'll like early on in the tune, it's always a good idea to while you're tuning to check out the spark plug. But
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that ride it, take the plug out and look at it. I don't know why. I just like I've always based my tuning off sound. If I, like I said, if I can sit there and blip the throttle and it's right there, then I know it's freaking solid. But then, like I said, while you're riding, if you're going down a hill and you hear four stroking, that's fine. If you're going on a flat ground and you're like half throttle and it's four stroking, in my opinion, that's fine. If you're going up a hill, you don't want it to four stroke because you're under load. Like, obviously, you don't want excessive amounts of it because then you're going to start fouling plugs. You're going to start to run super rich. But you
Yeah.
also don't want it on the opposite side because I've had this before on my PZ19 where I had it too lean and no matter where you put it, it never four stroke. It sounded almost too lean and it had a bit of a bog. So like the way that you can tell that you're too lean is if you're riding and you're going up a hill and it just straight up bogs, then you know it's too lean. But if you're too rich when you're excessively four stroking all the time and you got a crap ton of smoke and coming up the back and it doesn't have as much power again because like I said, you need to find that perfect range. You can have not as much power in both spectrums. You can have shitty power when it's too rich and you can have shitty power when it's too lean. So
Yeah. And especially one thing that I've found that is fantastic is if you have a carburetor with a adjustable fuel to air mixture screw, and you know that if you loosen that screw a few turns, that's going to put more air into the carburetor. If you tighten it, that's giving it a little bit more fuel. And so if you know that and it's running a bit weird and you might need to drop a jet or raise the jet and you play around with that fuel air screw and it makes a difference for better or for worse, that gives you kind of a clue on whether you need to
for
drop a
sure.
jet or
Yeah.
race it or not.
Because I've had that happen before where I know I'm out of tune when, or it could be an air leak too that does that too, where you're adjusting your air screw and it does absolutely nothing. Then you know
Yeah.
that you either got an air leak or you're way off on the pilot. Because that's what your air screw is connected to your pilot. It's just allowing more air, or sorry, it's allowing more. Isn't it fuel that goes through? Because like, isn't there a thing where if the air screw's in the front, it adjusts certain thing, but then if it's on the back side of the carburetor, then it adjusts a certain way. I think if it's facing towards the engine, like closest to the engine, I think it's a fuel screw. And then if it's on the outside, which most of them are like on the PWKs, that's an air screw. Like it's adjusting the amount of air. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like you said, if you turn it in, you're going to get more fuel. And if you back it out, you get more air. And pilot jets are kind of hard to find for some carburetors, especially the PZs for a lot of the motorized bike stuff. And a little trick I've shared on my YouTube channel a few times is on the PZ20 and the PZ19, they use 4 mil jets. And what I usually do is I drill up the emulsion tube and I tap it to M5 so that I can run like standard NT carb jets. And I've had great experiences with that. It makes things a lot easier for tuning. And when it comes to the pilot jets themselves, the only way that you're going to find PZ pilot jets is on like AliExpress, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't see none on eBay. I didn't see none on Amazon, as far as I'm concerned. So you're gonna have to wait a long time for those. But yeah, that's pretty much where I stand on it.
Yeah. And of course, so the pilot jet that controls your like idle to about quarter throttle or so, and your needle jet, I think it controls like it overlaps a little bit, but the needle jet controls like a quarter to three quarters, somewhere around there. And then your main jet controls three quarters to full throttle. And so you can kind of tune those likewise. Personally, when tuning, especially with my Minarelli and stuff, I need to completely retune my carburetor from the ground up. And so I'm starting with my pilot jet, and then I get that squared away. And then I get to my needle jet, and then to where both of those are synchronized pretty well, and I have pretty good low to mid RPM range. Then I tune my main jet. And I've been doing it that way, and it works great so far.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion also, when I do my, main jet, like, as the final thing, I still do it the same way you do. I start out low and then work my way up to the main jet. I like to run my main jet pretty fat because, especially with the higher RPM stuff, you could run into problems where it could get, like, excessively hot. So I rather stay on the safe side and run a bit rich up top, where
Yeah,
it's still not four-stroking, but it's not, like, so goddamn lean that it's, like, gonna, like, seize. So,
yeah,
yeah, I always play it safe on the main jet. But, yeah, for the other stuff, yeah, definitely you can lean those out and be pretty safe.
yeah. You have any other notes on that regard?
Yeah, I mean, as far as, like, air filters and stuff, that doesn't really affect the carburetor tune unless it's restrictive. So if you put a filter on something and it performs totally different, and then you know that that filter is restrictive. But I'm trying to think besides that, there's really not a whole lot. I mean, the carburetor is pretty simple. So, the talk about the crank stuff now too.
A lot of people don't realize this, but balancing your crank is like one of the best modifications you can do to your engine. Like it really opens it up without even any further like port work or anything. It's crazy.
Here's the thing with balancing a crank. It all depends on your like rotating assembly, like your piston weight and stuff. And I've very recently just gotten a weight scale, and I've always put it off. I've only balanced, I'm trying to think. I think like 3 or 4 of my engines have the drilled crank. And with a Chanadol, I'm gonna be completely transparent with you guys. If you go on Smolik Performance, if you go on any of the major websites that sell balanced cranks, for a 47 mil piston, the half-inch drill bit, 15 mil deep, and then the 2 little side holes, I can't recall how deep those are. I think they're like 5 mil at 7/16.
Yeah.
Those that is gonna work out so freaking well for you, you won't even believe it. But when it comes to the heavier weight, like saw pistons and stuff,
Yeah.
that's when it becomes tricky because no longer do you have that set balance factor that works out great. So that's when you need to do your own research on your actual piston weight and by gram scale and do a whole. The two stroke stuffing did a really good video. I've watched it a half a dozen times and have definitely wanted to tackle it like pretty soon on one of my engines. But basically, the higher the piston weight, the less that you have to drill in the crank. So with a Chanadol piston, where it's 47 millimeter, it's quite small. You have to drill a lot more material to equalize that weight. But the crank weights themselves are actually different thicknesses. I'm sure you know about this,
Yeah.
but you got your what that comes nowadays, a lot of engines, which pisses me off, is like 15 mil weights. Those are way too thin, in my opinion, for high performance applications. You got your 17 mil weights that I've had in a lot of engines that have worked great. And you have the Runwell slash Wildcat cranks with the 20 mil weights. Those are super wide.
Those are
Anything,
beefy.
they are beefy.
Like
And
they're the YD100s are known for having beefy cranks, especially in today's like engines. The Wildcat cranks are wider than the YD100s. They're crazy.
yeah, it's kind of weird though, because my first YD100 had those 17 mil weights. But then I just had my case read apart the other day because I was putting new gaskets in it and basically rebuilding it. And I measured it and it's like, oh, it's the 15 mil weights, but it has a YD rod on it. So
Yeah.
no clue what happened there. But yeah, a majority of YD100s will have the bigger weights on them. But yeah, balancing the crank, like you said, in my experience, it makes a huge difference on the higher RPMs.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
as
it's a great mod.
Keegan said, with like if you're just using a standard China doll, triple 40, YD100, whatever, if you just drill the 3 holes, the uh, hole in the center, uh, and with like a half-inch drill bit or whatever, and you drill through the crank weight and you leave like 1 or 2 millimeters on the end, and then you drill 5 millimeters in on both sides of the already existing holes,
Holes, yeah.
and you do that on both sides of the crank weights for pretty much any China doll, that will be where the money is at. That's gonna be like, unless you really want to get your scale out, that's going to be pretty dang close to what you want. However, as Keegan said, of course, if you're doing these hybrid builds, the MS460s, even like the Avenger 85s and all that stuff, I would definitely recommend getting out your scale and doing all the measurements and stuff.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Because if you want to be accurate with that stuff, and honestly, I was looking at the formulas and stuff, and I'm like, it's really not that much more complicated than port work. Like anybody could understand it, and yeah, it's not too bad.
yeah. And as far as like performance goes with balancing your crank, you can expect a exponential increase in like higher RPM power. Um, uh, very it hugely reduces like engine vibrations and stuff. Uh, it actually reduces engine wear, all that stuff. One thing I want to point out is a lot of people I've seen on Reddit, Facebook, all that, they'll complain about their engines running good and all that stuff, but after like a mile of riding, their butt, their spine, their hands just go numb from the vibrations. And so while that partly has to do with like how they mount their engine and also tune their carburetor, all that stuff, balancing your carburetor or why do I keep saying carburetor?
Oh,
Balancing
it's
your
funny.
balancing
Balancing your carburetor.
balancing your crank, like you get none of that. I was like surprised. Like Keegan said, you will be very surprised when you balance your crank, you put it back in there and you run it for the first time and you're like, "What? There's an engine on this bike?" It's crazy.
Yeah, cause I rode my, friend's, like, stock bike and stuff, and it's just I was like, "Holy crap," like, this thing's, like, a freaking I don't know what, it's just, like it's insane. Cause once you, like, get used to your own builds, cause a lot of them, like I said, have the balanced cranks, and then you go on a completely bone stock bike, like, I'm talking stock muffler, stock everything, and it's
Yeah.
like, I couldn't go 10 miles on this, like, it's just yeah, it's bad, so no, that's a good mod for sure, and I think a
And
lot of people skimp out on it because 'cause they'll put these high performance top ends on, and they won't touch the bottom end, and they won't replace bearings, and then the bottom end goes bad because that's the weak link if you think about it. You
yeah.
put on this insane performance setup, but if your bottom end isn't up for the task, it's terrible.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes for wheels, this goes for pistons, this goes for anything and everything. The less rotational mass you have, the better to an extent. Of course, if there's heavier flywheels on four strokes and all that stuff, but for two strokes especially, you'll get a ton better performance if you have less rotating mass in like the engine assembly itself. And so you start balancing and taking weight off that crankshaft and everything, it'll free it up and it'll work a lot better. Now with like I'm working on a video currently, and it's talking about building and upgrading your engine with like parts that work in harmony together. And so, as Keegan was saying, there's a lot of these people that upgrade their exhaust and their uh, their top ends, do a bunch of port work, but they don't work in harmony with the engine itself if it's fighting itself to spin those RPMs. So
Yeah,
that's it. Really comes in
because
handy for that balanced crank.
because the stock crank, let's be honest, was intended to spin at like 6K. So if you're revving at like 9K or 8,500, whatever the hell it is, anything that's like spinning this like a good amount of RPM, you need that bounce crank. I mean, it makes things like a world of a difference for
For sure.
for any kind of build. So I think mounting your engine properly too, because you'll hear a lot of things about vibration, and it really comes down to your engine mounts. Because I had this thing going on my Fell Faker bike for a while, where I had that U-bolt mount on an aluminum frame. And if any of you were watching, don't ever put a U-bolt on an aluminum frame, or at least if you're gonna, make sure that you have some sort of way, make it like sure it's not gonna like move around on you. Because I had mine like as I was riding, every time I twist the throttle, I could literally see the engine like rocking back and forth. And anytime I got on it, it just had this really bad vibration. So if you, like I said, anything to do with vibration, check your engine mounts, make sure they're tight and flush, like the back one, especially because if that's not flush, it's not gonna sit properly. So
Yeah. And I mean, now that we're on engine mounts, we're going all over the place with this one, but now that
that's all right.
now that we're with engine mounts, um they don't only play a big role in like vibrations and stuff. They also have a huge role in like how sturdy the bice the bicycle is. Now, I've done a lot of builds with like these beach cruisers and stuff. And honestly, as we've discussed before, in my personal opinion, the beach cruiser is like the ideal bike. The Huffy Cranbrook and all those. But a lot of people swear that they are terrible. There's a lot of people on there on Facebook and stuff that will post pictures saying that when they installed an engine on a beach cruiser, the frame cracked and split apart and all that stuff. And that will happen if you don't install the engine correctly. Now, as Keegan also said, if you don't have the rear engine mounted flush with the seat, the seat tube,
Yeah,
it can crack, and you'll get uh, unequal amounts of weight on.
force.
Yeah,
Yeah. Another tip, sorry to interrupt you, but what I usually do on the rear engine mount, I've had it countless number of times where the rear engine mount always has that little bit of gap. And what I usually do is like take some washers and put it behind the rear engine mount. Like you'll literally take that little block off and then put some washers on. And that usually, if you want a flush mount on the front and back, that usually fixes the issue. And it's a good little tip to know. So I
yeah.
just thought I'd put it out there.
That's the end of this episode. To get in contact with me, go to Reddit at sub to A.M.B Garage, noahalger at gmail.com. You can also find me on Noah Alger at Facebook or leave a comment on my YouTube channel at A.M.B Garage. You can also find my good friend Keegan at Keegan Hashe on YouTube or Keegan Hashe on Facebook. Thank you guys so much for watching. In next episode, we will be discussing a little bit more of just some other motorized bike stuff as well as aftermarket parts that we highly recommend and aftermarket parts to stay away from at all costs. All right, guys, thanks for watching again. Have a good one.